Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of In Event Talks. My name is Deji for those who do not know me, and I have this special honor of being your host today. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, In Event Talks is an original series by In Event, where we host discussions with industry experts as well as thought leaders across a number of fields and disciplines. One day it could be a talk on mental health. Another day it could be about the tools needed to navigate like your work experience or improve your efficiency, or even something about HR. You truly never know what you're going to get with us. The only thing that we guarantee is that it will be informative, educational, and entertaining. On today's In Event Talks, we're going to be speaking about how to improve your personal brand. And this is quite frankly a topic that I think everyone should pay attention to in 2022. If you've been on LinkedIn, then you've definitely seen how it can function in today's world. And to provide insights on our topic, we have with us an incredible guest today. Her name is Alesia Hendley. She is the business development representative at Audinate, an AV networking technology provider. She's also a multimedia journalist and content creator. Now, Alicia is an AV professional that found her passion at a young age, working as a sound engineer with her father's church. In the early stages of the church's foundation, they couldn't really afford musicians. But by utilizing different audiovisual technologies, she and her father found creative ways to go higher both musically and spiritually, taking the congregation with them the entire way. Today, you can find her operating or installing audiovisual systems or executing creative ventures across a number of fields and disciplines. And as a young professional, she's always finding ways to bring AV, creatives, and creative visions together, all in an effort to leave her mark in her own way. She also constantly strives to make an impact and not just an impression, which is why you can see why she would be such a good expert on personal branding. Alicia, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love hanging out with this team, so I'm sure we're going to have a great chat today.
Definitely, definitely. We're super excited to hear from you and me personally, because I think building a personal brand is something that I'm just always constantly thinking about ways to do. It can
Yeah.
sometimes be uncomfortable, so it'd be nice to have tips, just to kind of move that process along. And I'm seeing that there are a bunch of different people from joining us from different places today. Hi, Francis from Austin. It's so nice to have you on board. Hi, everyone who's joined us. This is about to be a really exciting time. And stick with us because we're really, really excited about this one. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start with some questions, Alicia. So I'll start with some questions about you. So I
Yeah.
think you do an incredible job with your personal brand, showing yourself as a human being and accepting that like everyone, you need a time out to rest. So like recently on social media, you just decided to take some time off, mentioning that during that time you were able to realign, regroup, and refocus on your professional and personal goals.
Yeah.
So the question I'll then ask would then be, how did you learn to schedule that time for yourself?
Oh, trial and error, right? It's only so many times where you find yourself running up against that brick wall of like burnout, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't realize how bad burnout actually was until the pandemic. And maybe it was because, is working at home for more. We were trying to find more creative ways to engage with each other. But over the last 2 years, I was like, okay, if I am going to continue to not only, pour into other people and help my clients and be, a top tier employee at work, I have to figure out how to better balance all of these different facets of what I do. So that's what led me to figuring out, like, all right, I got to come up with a plan. And that started because you have time off from work, you have holidays, national holidays, right? All these different paid holidays. And I was like, what holidays throughout this calendar, the calendar year, can I plan around to completely disconnect? There was a lot going on in the news that was triggering. There was a lot just going on at work that was like we came to a complete stop, and then we jumped right back into full-fledged business again. Like there was no separation of the two. So I started finding ways to completely disconnect to make sure that I could refill my cup uh, to do great work across all of those different facets of what I do.
Nice, nice. That's definitely some great insight to have. I think the pandemic definitely did a number on a lot of us. I think
Oh
for me,
yeah.
even 2 years on, there's still elements that I'm still not completely sure about. Sometimes it
Mhm.
feels like life is sped up in a way that I've never experienced before. So like even just these 2 years have felt like 10. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous. Yeah, I know.
exactly.
Planning is definitely one way to get around it, and just having like a very solid plan that you can stick to. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Um, the next question that I'll ask, and somewhat related to this as well, and just like the topic that we have today,
Mhm.
when did you decide to start working on your personal brand, and what led you to make that decision?
Yeah. So I started before I say that though. What's up, Tampa? I see you in the building. I'm in Tampa too, so we'll have to connect.
Shout out
Um,
to
Yeah,
Tampa.
shout out to Tampa. But it started for me back in like 2014. I was working in a space to where I knew I was not going to be my boss or my boss's boss within like the next 10 years, right? Just because of, people get in those positions and they stay there forever, until they retire, and it's very hard to work your way up within a certain time frame. And I have my own set of personal goals that I knew I was trying to achieve within my career. So in 2014, when I was an end user, I started blogging and kind of showcasing like behind the scenes, right? Before we went live, I was talking with the team about us AV kind of ninjas, right? The AV people are in the background. You don't see us unless something goes wrong. Then everybody turns around and is like, oh, who's that sound person? Or what's wrong with this digital signage board, right? You don't see us. So I was trying to figure out a way to tell the story of what I did within my career, because a lot of people didn't understand, like, oh, what do you do? I know that you make a decent living, but what actually do you do? So I started blogging in about 2014, and then that's when things really changed the game for me. Like, I'm not a writer, but I found ways to talk about the products I was using. I found ways to tell the story of what I actually do in this industry. And then I was showcasing like the latest and greatest technologies, which was also adding value to the community that I was a part of. So that's where it all started back in about 2014 for me.
Nice, nice. It's always interesting to see the things that kind of like, kickstart people's careers in a certain direction.
Yeah.
Um, I think for me, like in the past, I was studying law, just personal bit about me. And I
Really?
would sit in the classes and just be like, what am I doing here? What am I
Yeah.
doing here? And ultimately that kind of led me in another direction, having to work with like communications and marketing and things like that. So it's always very interesting to hear people's stories about how they arrived at where they are with their personal brands.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I was an audio engineer just running sound for concerts, right? And I reached this pay cap. I always thought I was gonna be like the sound engineer for Beyonce. That was my dream job. I wanted to be the front of house engineer for Beyonce, and then I quickly found out that I don't like load-ins and load-outs and traveling for weeks at a time. Like, I wanted a medium of that, so I had to pivot. So even though I still have a love for audio, I just found a way to pivot it into more of a, I guess people will call it a white collar, or a different avenue. I
yeah.
never saw myself here originally, but the more you pivot and the more you learn, especially in the tech space, that's how you're able to elevate. And then when you showcase it, that kicks it into another level when it comes to personal branding as well.
Interesting. So I'm actually going to follow up on something that you said about pivoting. So my question then would be, how could you tell the difference between just wanting to tap out and knowing that this was something that you didn't want to do? Because that could sometimes be a
Mm.
difficult thing for people, right? Where it's like, is this me being maybe lazy or not as inspired or trying as hard versus me just knowing that this is definitely not for me? So how were you able to come to that conclusion?
I had to do a lot of soul searching, because there's nothing more than I love than like working a soundboard and seeing that crowd engage with an artist. And you're just in that moment, like you're getting the goosebumps, right? So I had to do a lot of soul searching to really be honest with myself and say, hey, am I going to be okay with making a pivot? Am I going to be okay not doing this particular thing? Once I figured out, like, okay, yeah, there's more cons to pivoting, or more pros to pivoting, I should say, than cons. So when I realized that, then I checked myself and I said, all right, so what other avenues are there to pivot to and still keep this passion? So I don't think it was, that's that conversation you got to have with yourself, because some people can look at it as quitting, right? People are like, oh, Alicia, you no longer work the soundboard. You quit the music industry. And I'm like, did I? Or did I just pivot and now I work for a company that owns the sound chips that go into all of these devices that are in
Mhm.
concert venues and things like that, right? So there's a lot of different ways to measure your version of success. You have to start with that honest question of yourself of, is this something that I really want to do? And can I live with this pivot, right? You got to weigh your pros and cons. And that's exactly what I did. I stayed in that role for about maybe 2 additional years just to figure out if this was a good move or not, right? It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes you getting to know yourself on a personal level as well.
Nice, nice. That is very
Yeah.
helpful for me personally too. Just thinking about stuff.
It's hard.
Um,
It's hard, but
yeah,
you got to do it.
you have to do that self work. There's just no running away from it.
No way
Um,
around it.
so I'd like to touch base on a couple examples, and one of the ones that comes to mind is Oprah Winfrey.
Uh-huh.
So she's easily one of the queens of personal branding. One of
Right.
the few people in the world who everyone knows just by mentioning her first name. You don't even have to say Winfrey; everybody just knows instantly as soon as you say Oprah. That's who it is. Then even just the O as well. As soon as an
Yep.
O is in front of something, you instantly associate it with her. So she clearly knows about personal branding and has managed to capitalize on it in ways that few others have accomplished, which
Mhm.
has helped her to live her dream life and also just get paid to speak, which is one of the things that she did initially. She always said that she wanted to get paid to speak, and now she does.
Yep.
So just analyzing an Oprah from a personal branding perspective, what do you think are some of the keys to her success?
Ah, man, I love Oprah. I was able to see her once when she went on tour, maybe like 10 years ago. And I went by myself and I was like in the audience, like, "Wah!" Like I was screaming like it was LeBron James or something, you know. It was amazing. Oprah, you were definitely right, has set the standard, especially for the Black community. Like she was that figure that we saw was like, okay, we can actually own assets, we can actually create our own paths and do our own thing. So Oprah is always dope. But I think the biggest thing I was watching recently one of her 60-minute interviews from back in the day went live, and this was like right at the start of the Oprah Winfrey Talk Show. And I think her number one thing to success was that, you know, she believed that she would still do well because a lot of people didn't think her TV show would do well. The guy asked her, he said, "Yeah, the show's going to start. And what if it fails?" And she said, "I personally will still do well because I believe success is how I treat myself and how I treat other people."
Mm,
And that right there was very like powerful to me because she didn't base her success off of the talk show, off of the books, off of the speaking. She based success off of a purpose. And when she focused on that purpose, then everything came together. So I think that was probably the biggest um, take takeaway that I've taken away from her career over time was that she built her foundation on a very strong purpose that led to her success.
interesting. So every single time it feels like it keeps coming back to like planning because initially you
Yeah.
spoke about planning and like trying to understand what your plan is, and even just with understanding your purpose, I think that revolves around the same
Hmm.
concept. Because then if you have that purpose, then you can build everything else around it.
Exactly.
Kind of like with me when I think about marketing or even like planning for a press release or whatever,
Mm.
it typically comes down to a theme that I can build around, and I would
Yep.
think that purpose would somewhat be similar to that. So that's very
Exactly.
very insightful and interesting. Um, Another question about Oprah. What are some things that you would highlight about her personal brand management?
Mm.
So just having observed her over the years and being a big fan, like what are some things that you think are some highlights just that she's been able to accomplish?
I think one of the biggest highlights for me watching her and be inspired by her was how she was able to scale. Right, a lot of people like getting started is half of the battle. Right, you got to start somewhere, but being able to scale and implement each step of the way is an even bigger challenge than starting. And we've seen her scale from the talk show to like tours to owning her own network to directing television shows. Like it's just became this big, profound thing. And the fact that she was able to scale that is definitely a highlight of her career for me because she started with her purpose. She built that talk show and then was able to scale it out to so many different things that's led her to be what I think she is still the richest woman in the world. Right. But she didn't get there overnight. She scaled it over time and
Yeah,
made really great decisions in doing that.
absolutely, and built careers as well. I think that's one of
Exactly.
the Oprah Winfrey tree is long as can be imagined. So many different people have been able to build up successful lives and just incredible purposeful like experiences just by being aligned with her. So it's been very impressive just seeing her being able to scale in that way.
Yeah,
Super
taking
inspiring.
people with you. Yeah, taking people with you
Absolutely.
is
Absolutely.
extremely important as well.
Absolutely. And it lines back to what you were saying with purpose,
Mhm.
because that is not really a metric that can be measured with pieces of paper. That's
Right.
like a very intangible thing. So I think, yeah, it definitely matters being able to base your success on your purpose as opposed to, just a show or the numbers or like how many viewers you have and things like
Right.
that.
Right.
Um, so another thing that I'm going to go into, people often talk about wanting to improve their personal brand. So
Mhm.
you undoubtedly know what a business brand is. We refer to brands regularly when discussing influencer marketing, for example.
Right.
But you probably don't think much about having a brand yourself. So the idea of personal branding is unusual to most people, is what I would say, right? But in this
Mhm.
online era where things both good and bad last forever on the internet, personal branding can be considered more important than ever.
Yeah.
So if I was going to speak to our audience now, I'd say, for example, like if you ever Googled your name, what sort of thing would come up? I know that when I Google my name, at the moment, it doesn't really bring anything particularly substantial. That's something that I think about. So I wonder, like, how do you connect? How can I phrase this in a way that works? But like, how do you manage to align your values and your beliefs with your personal brand? And in turn, like, what are your strategies to communicate this on social networks like LinkedIn? So like ensuring that when your name is typed into Google, that the things that you want to be perceived or how you want to be perceived is what actually shows up online as
Mhm.
opposed to just some random stuff, like maybe something you did 10 years ago and forgot about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, perception is everything, right? And that's part of personal branding. Everybody wants to be perceived in a certain way, but you actually have to do those things, right? Uh, to work towards this perception that you're trying to create, and not only let it be a perception but make it a reality, right? So when people Google themselves, I think it's bigger than that, right? It's bigger that you have to be the same person online and offline. So that's been my strategy personally, right? You're gonna see me, I don't know, post my videos from events. I'm gonna be dancing because that is part of who I am. Like, that's part of my
Yeah,
brand. That is who I am. I love to dance, and we're gonna dance it up. And when you see me in person, I'm probably gonna walk right up to you and start dancing too because I'm excited, I'm happy, and that's just part of my personality. Like, your personality is the brand. So it's very important to reflect those little nuances that are fun and yet engaging, and kind of flip them into a professional brand, right? You have to incorporate you there's a very fine line of incorporating your personal beliefs into your professional beliefs, but I think that is the middle ground that makes for a great personal brand.
yeah. That's interesting. And funny enough, I was having a conversation about this yesterday. And I think what I would then ask, just based on what the answer that you gave, is so how then do you kind of like quiet that inner voice that says maybe some of the things that
Mm,
you do personally might not fit into a business context? And just giving more of an example. So how does a person how does a person build upon themselves, if that makes sense? So like I feel like there's a pressure now with social media and just seeing what
mhm.
everyone else is doing, like with LinkedIn, for example, to cater to a certain type of audience. But how then would you say that you built that idea of like being comfortable in your own skin and then being able to like, infuse it into the work that you do or your personal brand more specifically?
Right, right, and that's a challenge, right? Because I like to dance, but I'm not gonna post a video of me at the club with my friends, right? Like, it's choices. It's choices. If you love dogs, okay, how can you play dogs into a professional setting? Work from home is big. Take pictures of you and your dogs. That's your coworker, right? Like, people love that for some reason. Like, we like seeing engaging lifestyle type of engagements. So I
Yeah,
would think, like, legit pick and choose. Some people are really into politics, right? But you'll never see me talk about politics because I've made a choice not to vocally talk about a legit campaign or politics, because
yeah,
that is something in not only the US that's like sticky,
yeah, yeah,
but it's just there's a place and time for everything. And on LinkedIn, I think it is known as that professional platform. So you have to check yourself, like, oh, is this something that a potential boss of mine or a potential partner of mine would value, or would, how would they perceive it? And
yeah,
it comes back to choices.
yeah. Definitely agree with that. I think, yeah, and even just easing into it can help as well.
Right.
Not just going the entire way at once. Finding what you're comfortable with. Um,
Trial and error. Trial and
Trial and
error.
definitely, definitely. For me, I found that when I was hired by Innovent, I posted like a pic to kind of commemorate it, and in
Mm,
the pic, so it was a full like a body pic in landscape mode of me just
okay.
sitting at a laptop during the interview, and my upper body I had a turtleneck. I had on a turtleneck because I had to be very serious and professional in the interview,
Fly.
and my
Yes.
lower body I had on like super short shorts. And so
Yes.
today, that is the post that has the most engagements on LinkedIn, and people were just like, "Yeah, this is so real and authentic, and it just feels very like a real thing that would happen." So I definitely see a lot of value and credence in being yourself online, but also just kind of towing the line and ensuring that you don't go too far.
Exactly. And when you do that, then you kind of get into this repetitive mode. You can go back and see, okay, well, hey, this post did really well. People want to see my half professional and half fun side, right? There's a beautiful mixture of people wanting to see what you do at the beach and what you do in the office.
Absolutely.
When you
Absolutely.
find that sweet spot, it is the gold for personal branding. Like, and it can be done on LinkedIn. LinkedIn doesn't have to always be this serious, super professional type of thing. There is that sweet spot.
Yeah,
And that's where I live. But it took time to figure out what that sweet spot was. And it varies from industry to industry.
absolutely. Absolutely. And a great
Yeah.
point about LinkedIn as well, because I've seen LinkedIn be very performative, and it's
Mhm.
it's always earns an eye roll for me. It's just like, oh my gosh, I know this person in real life. They're not like this. But
Right? Right. That's half the battle too. Being who you are online and being that same person offline. If you're
yeah,
extremely vocal online, then when I see you at an event, it's kind of weird if I just see you in the corner by yourself.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like you
yeah,
have to work the room just the same way you work a social post. So like I said, it's a lot of sweet spots that you have to find. But
yeah,
once you go through that trial and error process and find those sweet spots, then it's kind of like a well-oiled machine.
yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. So
Yeah.
one thing I'll say, when we do these talks, we like to leave people with takeaways,
Mm.
um, and typically just things that they can list out and just be able to refer to and probably like meditate on and just remember. So one of the questions I was going to ask, just to kind of inspire that, is, what are the main considerations that you think we need to consider when we're building a personal brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So when considering your personal brand, always start with your why, right? People shied away from personal brand for so long because they're like, oh, I don't want to be known as this person that's being, trying to create a personal brand so I can get paid. You know what I mean? Like if money is your ultimate goal, then you need to rethink it, right? Is not how this works. So you need to think about your why, and your why has to be greater than money. And then does that why tie into your like personal core values, right? Like the purpose has to tie into your personal core values so that way the passion exudes within everything that you do. And that's how you stand out, right? Cuz there's a lot of personal brands out there. A lot of people talk about the same things, but what makes you unique is when you hone in on your why and your passion and lean into that purpose fully with no matter what you do. And then third, I would say once you know what your why and your purpose is, pick three pillars that focus or tie back into that ultimate branch of your purpose and your why, right? So it's like, all right, my why is to go out and engage in an industry that is male dominated. Okay. And why do I want to do that? Because I want to create change within a space and break bias. All right. How do we do that? And what are you going to talk about that lead back up to those things? All right. I'm in this specific industry, so I'm going to have to talk about the technology within this industry. But then I'm also going to talk about diversity and inclusion. How do we get more people involved into this industry? And then I'm going to highlight all of these different things in a fun way by creating engaging content, right? So have three pillars that are lined up with your personal and professional why and purpose. And then once you get those three pillars, you can build the content out around it. You can build out the events you can go to. You can build out the people you want to network with in these different industries. So build the foundation, work out your tree of your three pillars, and everything you do will revolve around your purpose. And if you do that, then hey, I don't know if we'll all make it to Oprah's level, but at least at least we'll reach our own levels of what success looks like to us, right? Because what success looks like to me might look different to you, right? And that's okay.
Absolutely.
We should not You should not compare yourself to others' version of success. You are the only person that can create your own success and whatever
Yeah,
that looks like. So start with your purpose and get your trees and create content around that. And I'm telling you, it really it changes. Like it doesn't change overnight, but it changes over time for the better.
yeah. Lovely, lovely, fantastic. Those are some great points to hold on to. The entire time that you've been speaking, I've just been taking notes because
Yeah.
personal brand, like I said, isn't something that anyone in 2022 can necessarily ignore. I'm still trying to build my personal brand, and there's specific
Yeah.
things that you've touched on that really ring true with me. So we appreciate that. I think one more thing that I'm just gonna. Oh yeah, and also even just the point about like determining what it is for yourself. I wanted to
Mhm.
touch on that too.
Yeah.
I remember reading an article recently where people who were, and it's a little morbid, but I guess it's just real, where people who were like at the end of their lives were discussing some of the things that they regretted the most.
Mm.
And honestly, a lot of them, the common thread that you can find across was that they lived for other people. They didn't live for
Mm.
themselves. They didn't do things that made them truly happy. Because maybe they felt like they had to be more realistic about their expectations, or
Mhm.
they just had to play it safe because they were paying bills or whatever the case may be. And that really struck a chord with me, which also leads now to my next question. So for a person who's thinking about making that grand step eventually to building their personal brand, maybe
Mhm.
not necessarily gets into an Oprah level, but something for themselves, what is the first thing that they should think about? So what is that very first thing that they should do so that they're not just always discussing it like this? So it's like, okay, eventually I'm going to start, and they never do. So like, what is the first thing that you would advise for them to start this journey?
The first thing you need to do is figure out what vehicle you're gonna put your personal brand into, right? For mine, I started blogging, right? And that was very tied into a social aspect. But people have been personal branding way before the internet existed. Okay, you don't like social, don't force yourself to use it because then you're going to hate building a brand. Like you can't hate it, right? You got to actually enjoy it or it won't work. So if you don't like social media, all right, think of another way. Is that you going door to door? Is that you going into businesses with your camera and creating for them? So you're not necessarily the face of it because people think about personal branding and they're like, oh, I got to be in front of a camera. No, you don't. You can, so figure out your vehicle of how you're going to drive it, right? For me, my vehicle was social media because I was already using it. I was just talking smack with my friends and getting a lot of traction. So I flipped it on its head and I was like, what if I used these social tools to build my career? And then it was like a light bulb went off, right? So you got to figure out what vehicle you're going to drive. What does that look like? Is it social media? Is it door to door? Is it, I don't know, flyers hanging out somewhere in the community? It depends on what your vertical is and what you are willing to do that you would actually kind of enjoy. Because I mean, we spend most of our lives working. You might as well
Absolutely.
like it,
Absolutely.
instead of
Absolutely.
trying to be miserable. So figure out
Absolutely.
what vehicle you want to drive this in and make sure it's a vehicle that you actually enjoy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. At this stage, I'm wondering if we have time for some questions because I feel like we might have overrun our time just a little bit, but maybe we can take a couple.
All
Let's
right.
just see if
All right.
there's any questions from the audience. Guys,
Sure.
feel free to leave your questions and we could, get to them. Otherwise, this could be we could just wrap it up here with this great advice and I could just go and let it simmer,
Just let
because
it simmer.
yeah, just let it simmer because there's been so much that's come today that's been personally just beneficial. But I'm
That's
still gonna
awesome.
hold up for questions for just a little bit
Yeah.
and then we, decide to move on or whatever.
Well, I appreciate you all having me. The Any Event team, it seems like you all are just built up of so many creative and engaging individuals, and you all get it, right? You all get branding, right? Because there's a difference between a personal brand and a company brand.
Yeah,
Um, and when you have a company where you have all these amazing people, once they start creating personal brands, it's like a win-win for the
absolutely.
company and
Absolutely.
for the team members. So shout out to y'all for just killing it across the board. I feel like every one of y'all are just killing it in your own way to raise brand awareness about an event. So that's dope.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the compliment. I know when I first came to an event, it was almost like a culture shock because everyone was just so nice and helpful.
Yeah.
It was like a distant cry from some of the experiences that I'd had in the past. So it's
Yes.
nice to hear someone kind of affirm that as well. Oh, and it looks like we have a question. So, a
What's up?
question
What's
from
up?
Angelica.
Okay.
Inspired you, Alicia? Alicia,
Uh,
rather.
so let's see. A lot of people inspired me, but I guess from the ground up, when I made this pivot, I would say Dory Clark. A lot of her books. She went to Harvard Business School and she does a lot of teachings there. Her books like the Entrepreneurial You and How to Stand Out and things like that really helped me get started. But overall, I'm just like Damon John, Kanye West, Puff Daddy, like visionaries, people who were visionaries, right? Like they didn't
Yeah.
actually have like the talent themselves, right? Puff Daddy is not the best rapper, but he always put the best producers, best artists, best dressed people, right, in the videos and made that all work. He had a vision, and that's what I do, right? I like bringing in creative ventures and creative people and putting them in a space and creating amazing content. So I've been inspired by those people who are truly visionaries within their own rights and kind of tailoring it to what I do.
It feels like it might have just cut out on my end for a bit.
Oh,
Can you
did I
still
lose
see
you?
me? Can you see and hear me?
Yep, I can see you. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what happened on my end.
No
Oh,
worries.
it looks like we've lost her, but honestly, stage, this has just been very insightful and enjoyable. There's so much that I've been able to take down. Just rehashing on some of the points that Alicia gave us. So in thinking about your personal brand, you should always think about your why. So your why is everything. Oh, fantastic, she's back. I was just doing some of the recapping for you over like what we've learned today. And I'm just telling them that people should think about their why. Think about your why, think about your purpose. What are your core values? Then you should also build three pillars, I believe. I don't want to misconstrue what it is that you said.
Yep.
You should also have three pillars that attach to these different parts, which are considered your foundation, and to let everything else revolve around those. Do you think that was like a decent enough job of recapping? Okay,
Spot on.
great.
You got your notes
Great.
down
Great,
pat.
great, 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 great. And then also, finally, you should figure out what your vehicle is for personal branding. So if you're a writer, maybe think about blogging. If you're not comfortable with social media, then probably go to more in-person events. You don't have to be in front of a camera, like she said. We definitely feel a lot of pressure with like
Mm,
TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, or whatever. But you have to figure out what works for you because that way it's more sustainable and people can kind of like see when it's authentic as well. So all these are great touch points that I feel like it's great for us to leave with. And we are so grateful that you came to meet us, Alicia. We appreciate the compliments. We are
Thank you.
just completely honored that you graced us with your presence.
Hey, likewise, likewise. Hopefully we could do this again sometimes. Great work, guys.
I would love to. I would love to. And thanks to everyone from around the world, from everybody connected, from Tampa, from Austin, from Chicago. We love you guys. And, this would be nothing without you. So we're definitely looking forward to having you on board for the next In Event Talks. Alicia, thank you again. This is fantastic.
Thank you,
And
Deji.
honestly, I just wish you the best in everything that you're doing. If you decide to go work with Beyonce someday, as she's about to go on tour, so this might be the time.
I
This
know,
might be-
right?
but yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.